during my graduation, I was high. It was not a good thing. It was not a good thing. My family could see it. I thought I was hiding it so well too. That's the fallacy right there, is like, as an addict, you think you're hiding it so well. But no, they can see when you're like walking and you're like I was locking myself out of my apartment.
Welcome to What I Meant to Say. I'm your host, Wendy Jones, founder of Be Better Media and a mom of 4, passionate about human connection. Throughout my journey, I have experienced many What I Meant to Say moments. But since life doesn't give us do-overs, I've created a space to reflect and tell our stories again, with a little more grace for ourselves and the hope that we can help others and be better for having listened. Welcome to What I Meant to Say. I'm your host, Wendy Jones, and I'm here today with Taylor Grant, and she has a beautiful recovery story that she's willing to share. And there's nobody that hasn't been touched by addiction in their family and their lives. I think it's so prevalent in American life today, and I'm so grateful that you're here today and willing to share your story. So thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm happy to be able to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. And you and I have shared a little bit conversation before.
Yeah.
And the fact that it takes a lot of bravery to sit here and be willing to share what you've been through. And
100%.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Let's dive right in and
sure.
Can you share with me how you found yourself in that addictive pattern and this recovery journey that you're on?
Absolutely. So my addictive tendencies began when I was actually quite young. Mm-hmm. I didn't find alcohol or drugs till I was 21 years old. But I grew up a ballet dancer, a horseback rider, and I got a lot of attention for my performance capabilities, my good dancing technique, all of that. And so I quickly became addicted to that dopamine feeling of being recognized and congratulated and seen. And the addiction to attention began at a very early age for me. I'm talking like 6 years old, really early. And then what happened is I started to experience later in my adolescent years intermittent bouts of depression. I had a lot of anxiety as a child. My mom remembers changing my diaper on the diaper changing table, and I was shaking. Like it was an ingrained...
Yeah, your nervous system already at that young age
was shot.
Yeah.
It was like adrenal overload.
And you came into this world highly sensitive.
Hypersensitive, yes. Highly sensitive human. Very empathetic. I've always been able to really feel other people's energies, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
The frequencies and energies that they're emitting. And from a young age, I would absorb those energies.
Yeah.
And so I would take on a lot of people's, be it pain, overexcitement, sadness. My father lost his father a couple months before I was born. So I was born into a grieving family.
Yeah.
I was the first life after a very profound death. And so my dad wouldn't put me down. And this is no judgment on his part.
Yeah.
It's just how he coped with his grief at the time. He didn't want to put me down. He didn't want my mom to hold me. I was his. And I believe, looking back now as an adult, that energy and that fear, I think, that he was admitting unconsciously, it seeped into me from a very young age.
Yeah.
So going back to kind of how I got into the physical addiction, it started mental. It started mentally trying to be perfect, perfectionism. As we'll talk about a little later, my parents had a happy, beautiful marriage for 12 years, but then unfortunately it became a very volatile divorce, a very litigious divorce. And those...
and how old were you when that?
They separated when I was 8 years old. And as I've talked about, I can feel people's energies. And though it was very hidden under the rug, the discomfort, the anger, it was still palpable.
Yeah.
And I could sense the tension, right, in the family system. So I was young. I was very young. I was 8 when they separated, and it was a very tumultuous separation. And then they started actually going to court and battling over child custody matters from when I was like 8 to I think 12 years old. It was around, it was a long let out divorce. It was very long. It wasn't quick. So I observed that. I observed those, dysfunctional conflict management patterns that they showed. And it messed me up. I'll put it very straightforward. It really messed me up. It really harmed my self-esteem. I was a daddy's girl from the start. I was super attached to my father more than my mom. And so when he left the family unit for another person, I took it very personally, and it did some sort of damage that was just catastrophic to my self-esteem.
It runs really deep.
Really core.
Daughter. It's a safety relationship.
Yes.
And you probably have far more psychological terms as a grad student going through to become a family therapist, but that is a core wound.
It is a core wound.
Yeah, it's a root chakra. Wound. Yeah.
It's an obstruction of the root chakra. Right? Completely displaced. The root chakra is down here. That's why I'm pointing to it. But that was very quickly eradicated. That feeling of safety and comfort and stability. So my anxiety really increased. My depression became very severe in high school. I was doing everything I could to not isolate. So I was like, I put myself on the dance team. I was a straight A student. It was all about performance for me. I didn't have any pressure from my parents to be like a straight A student or anything. That was all pressure I put on myself. I wanted to be seen by my dad again, because that wound, that father-daughter wound of not getting that vital attention I needed from my dad in my pivotal years of young adolescence was really hard. And so then what happened is, high school was really not a fun time for me. It was one of the worst times of my life, actually. Like I was very isolating. It was hard for me to make friends. I had social anxiety, and I think it came from an obstructed view of self. My self-image was completely distorted. I had eating disorder tendencies start to come on. I was also a ballet dancer. And so that culture, Manhattan Beach, also growing up in Manhattan Beach, nothing wrong with Manhattan Beach, but there's a culture there that's all about like kind of superficiality, how you look, how you perform. LA in general.
What it looks like instead of what it feels like.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. And so I became very good at suppressing my hurt feelings. And, I had a very volatile relationship with my father, unfortunately. In my teenage years, I'm not going to talk about really what happened with my dad. That's personal stuff. But he went through a lot of pain as well with the divorce, as did our whole family. A lot of projections were going on. It made me feel like it was my fault, even though now, of course, looking back at it as an adult, I know it's not my fault. But it very much felt that way. And so when I went to college, and mind you, I didn't party at all in high school. I isolated. I isolated. So I would not party. I didn't kiss a boy till I was 21.
Wow.
I didn't drink alcohol till I was 21. Nor do drugs or anything like that. And I felt like when I got to college, it was my time to let loose and experience myself not so tethered to perfectionism, if that makes sense.
It's the first time in your life where it's almost like you get to explore a new identity and you're on your own. And yet it's still a safe place if you have the coverage of your parents, if you're there and your education is paid for. If you don't have those stresses, college is one of the most free times of your life. And especially coming out of that pressure cooker that you're describing, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Right?
Yeah.
And what was interesting, I had distance from that family unit as well.
Yeah.
And I felt a new sense of independence.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like a caretaker anymore to my family.
Yeah.
There was in therapy that I'm learning about, we call the dynamic where, let's say, two divorced parents or parents who are having difficulties in the relationship, they can't communicate properly with each other.
Mm-hmm.
They'll usually pull in a child or someone readily available in the family unit to triangulate the message. And it's called triangulation. So a lot of triangulation was happening in my family unit. And I think it was, my parents aren't educated on that. They don't know it's not purposeful.
Yeah.
It happens. It's so common in families. It's not always a bad, horrible thing either.
Yeah.
But in this scenario, it wasn't helpful.
Yeah.
So my dad would want me to tell my mom something, so it would go through me, or financial intense pressure of what was happening in the unit would be told to me, kind of a thing.
Yes.
Can you tell your father this when you see him? Can you tell your mother this?
Yeah.
Bad talking happened. It's very common in a hostile
is.
divorce.
Yeah.
Especially when my parents were very much in love. It was a beautiful relationship that broke. So when there's love, it turns to hate pretty quick.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the opposite emotion.
Give me the chills. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm in college. I will say my first 2 years of college, I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo.
Me too. I love that about us.
Yeah.
We have a lot in common.
That's so awesome.
It's so great when I found that out.
Right?
It is still my happy place.
It's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
But I was, for some reason, you never leave yourself behind. So no matter how beautiful the place was, my anxiety and depression came with me, right? Because it lives up here. Right. And my first 2 years of college were really hard. I had grown really close to my mother during the divorce, since my father used to be the sole parent I would go to. He was mainly absent and was not emotionally available. So I then attached to my mom. And so then when I split from my mom and went to college, that was really hard on me.
Yeah.
I did have that really nice sense of independence, but I also had a lot of fear. A lot of cognitive dissonance going on. Right? And I didn't really know my identity. I'd always attached an identity to, I'm a dancer, I'm a horseback rider, I'm a student. So I did attach my identity at the time to being a student, but I didn't really know who Taylor was.
Yeah.
So what happened is, after 2 years in college, I quickly discovered, and I was very isolating as well in college. I was continuing that dysfunctional pattern of isolating because of fear.
Yes.
Of being seen by people, being rejected by people.
Yeah.
Really? Because I'd been rejected in my mind by my father. And that was such a pivotal loss that I was worried other people would reject me.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. And I found alcohol. And partying and alcohol is a widely accepted social norm in college.
Yeah, for sure.
Partying is so accepted and promoted. And so I was like, I'm really tired of isolating and being miserable. I'm really tired of this. So I'm going to go party now. Yeah. I'm going to let loose, like I was talking about earlier. And, I really enjoyed it when I started drinking. Yeah. It was...
So it starts off
fun.
Carefree, fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhat like modest, like safe kind of, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
It started off very like, wow, like I'm a party girl now. You know, like I'm
like, let's try
fun.
on this new identity.
Let's try this new identity. Let's grab onto this one. Let's see how the party girl goes for me. Because I used to be very shy, timid, but a brainiac, like very studious and academic, kind of the nerd.
Yeah.
I'm tired of that.
Yeah.
Let's try this. Let's wear some shorter shorts. You know, let's try a whole new identity. Let's wear not a lot of makeup, but let's do yourself up.
Yeah.
So I did that, and it was fun for a minute. But what I quickly noticed is that when I drank alcohol, and this is something I did notice my first time drinking alcohol, is the euphoria, the comfort, the social buffer it gave me was so like empowering. I was like, oh my gosh, this cognitive like mind chatter stopped.
Yep.
Finally. The malady of the mind where I'm just constantly negative self-talk, it stopped. I didn't care what people thought of me. And I let loose, and I thought I was just so much more of a fun person to be around when I was drinking. I felt so much more comfortable around people.
Yeah.
I was much more of a conversationalist. I could hold conversations better. I wasn't thinking about my insecurities.
Yeah.
So that reaction to alcohol became very attractive to me.
Yeah. So quickly.
Very quickly.
You feel free.
I felt very free.
Yeah.
It was quite a, it's like I fell in love, like with something. It's like a very
powerful.
Almost, and it turned quickly. I always think of my relationship to drugs and alcohol as like an insidious codependent relationship.
Comes on strong.
Very strong. You know, I feel really like sexy and talkative and smart. It gave me this very altered sense of self.
Yes.
Kind of arrogant almost, where all my life I'd felt very less than. I almost felt more than. It was a very wide pendulum swing. And I was willing, I'd rather feel better than less than.
Yeah.
And I'd gone 21 years feeling pretty less than.
Yeah. That self-worth issue comes through in so many of these healing stories.
Yeah.
Really important to notice. And it's hard to get to. You really have to take a healing path from what I've experienced to understand that deep sense of self-worth that's lacking in so many of these stories.
It's that ingrained core faulty self-belief that I am unlovable. I am not worthy. I am not worthwhile. I'm invisible. It's just very, very, now that when I say it to myself, I kind of like, because I don't believe that stuff anymore. I've done a lot of work.
Yeah.
But those were very prevalent themes in my mind that were coming out. And like, oh, you don't look like, you know, you're not pretty. You're not smart. You're like, I would have very negative self-talk.
Yeah.
And it went away with alcohol. Completely.
And so when that started, was it like one night a week, 2 nights a week? Did it ramp up?
It ramped up rapidly.
Okay.
So from one night, it went to 3. From 3, it went to 5. And what I started noticing is, I was only a social drinker in the beginning. I began to isolate and buy alcohol and take it to my room.
Oh, yeah.
That's
the
a
game
quick
changer.
turnaround is when you start isolating and using or drinking. That's the big no. That's when something shifted. What I noticed is when I wasn't drinking, my dopamine was so low, my serotonin in my mind was so low. I felt so depressed. Alcohol is a depressant. And I was already predisposed for severe intermittent bouts of depression. So I would wake up severely depressed where I couldn't get out of bed. Yeah. And I'd be like, okay, you got to go to school. You got to do what you got to do. But tonight you can go and party and drink and meet guys and, you know, get that validation from men, which was a drug in and of itself as well. It would give me an actual dopamine rush.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So before I knew it, and drugs hadn't found me yet, but this was just alcohol. And I was like getting really anxious again, waking up at 4 a.m, super panic attacks.
That is something I know from my own experience, and I've read a lot about now, that although alcohol takes you down, like you've described, and it takes away the social anxiety and is very, you know...
In the moment.
Especially if you're prone to anxiety,
it
comes raging back. And I know that 4 a.m., I mean, part of the reason, like, I don't drink hardly at all anymore is because that anxiety, that, like, one, I value my sleep so much as I get older.
So vital.
But that anxiety is, people don't know that because you think you're drinking to take the edge off. But then that edge comes back harder.
Tenfold. It comes back like like I'm getting slapped in the face at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Like out of nowhere, I just wake up in a cold sweat. So anxious.
Yeah.
I also started to black out pretty quickly. I would drink to numb my internal pain.
Okay.
So it became a numbing mechanism. What I noticed, what's different for me than people who can drink normally, is they can stop. They can stop after 1, 2, even 3, 4 drinks.
Right.
Maybe they'll drink 5 drinks and realize that was too much for me. I won't be doing that again. Well, I'll drink 5 drinks and I'll have a bad experience. I'm a lightweight. And I'll be like, oh, I'm never going to do that again. You know, that was horrible. I will do it again. I will actually drink 8 the next time because I want to black out. I want to alter my current state of reality. That's why I drink. Yeah. I don't drink just to socially. No, it's because I want to change how I'm feeling mentally. That's the sole reason I drink. That's why I can't pick up a drink today. Because if I do, I won't be able... I could go maybe a month drinking normally, but before I know it, I will have lost my job, all my money. I won't be functional. I won't be able to eat. I'll have delirium tremens, right? Yeah. And I'll be addicted to drugs again because I'll talk about alcohol now. Always in my story leads me to pretty hard drugs. And that's where things get very unmanageable. Okay. So rewind a little. I'm in college. I'm drinking. I'm now drinking, isolating and drinking. I'm drinking alone. I'm drinking now to just numb. My friends are getting annoyed with me that I'm always like blacking out on their watch. Like it's very annoying to them. Rightfully so. Yeah. And, you know, now I'm waking up in men's rooms I don't know, right? So now I'm putting myself in pretty precarious situations. Yeah. I've gone from not kissing a boy to like, I don't even know what happened on my first I can't remember actually my first sexual encounter. I can't. Yeah. It's unfortunate. But that's something addiction does. Yeah. It was also starting to, I was on some medication for my depression. Well, I decided I don't need that medication. Alcohol helps. So I stopped taking my medication. I stopped calling my psychiatrist. I stopped going to therapy. I stopped showing up to classes. Yeah. Because I'm sleeping through my morning classes because I was out so late, like drunk, wasted. I don't know how I did it. What I've learned about myself, I'm a very determined person. If I have a goal in mind, I will get that goal done. I've always been that way. And I'm like, I have to graduate college. Yeah. You know, I was in denial, I believe. I knew there was addiction in my family. I was very aware of that history, but I was in denial that I had a problem. And that's also a very common factor with people who suffer from addiction is they're in denial. And that's been my experience. I'm like, you know, I'm a college student. Of course I'm drinking. It's totally fine. When deep down I knew there was something wrong. Right. And that's the cognitive dissonance going on.
That disconnection within yourself. Yes. You can only live with for so long. Right. That lying to yourself. It's very potent. And so what happened, you know, I did finish my classes, A's and B's. Don't know how I did that, but I was driven. Yeah. I went home. This is now the summer before my senior year of college. And of course I meet a guy and online on Tinder. Your candor, just let me say, is such a beautiful thing. Okay. Like it really.
I'm very honest.
It's amazing and beautiful, and I just want to say that. Okay, good. Keep going, but it is. Okay. It's. Really,
I'm glad I can be honest. That's been a saving grace of mine, actually. Absolutely. Is honesty.
Yeah, you shine the light on it.
Yeah, you have to shine it on there.
Like it really is. It's really.
It takes the power away from it too. Yeah. So, I met this guy on Tinder, and you know he tells me he's like, oh, you know, I have 2 months sober. And at the time, I wasn't aware of what sobriety really was. I wasn't aware of 12-step programs that help achieve that sense of recovery and sobriety. So I didn't understand that 2 months sober was not a long time.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Cool. And he would get me wine and he wouldn't drink. So looking back now as an adult, I was probably 22 at the time and he was like 38.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good age gap.
That's a good age gap.
Yeah.
I look at the time and I wish I could tell Taylor, the younger Taylor, like, this person's taking advantage of you. But even if I could sense that, I almost was okay with it because he was getting me substances for free.
Yeah.
Right?
And do you think, this is the connection I make, so let me know if I'm overstepping here, but that desire to be taken care of. Like, when you see those relationships that are, even in age or just that need to be loved, like we seek out relationships, we want to be loved so much, and it's in every single human. But that desire to be taken care of, I see that a lot. I can identify with that. And
you're right on.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked at that very closely.
Okay.
But that's true. Where I didn't feel taken care of by my father. This is very stereotypical daddy issues, but they're very real. I don't care how stereotypical and funny they sound. They're not to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
Because it ruined my life for a minute.
Yeah.
I allowed, and what this book is so beautiful, Daughters of Divorce, it talks about how we don't have to continue the legacy of divorce. Or it talks about how a lot of daughters of divorce tend to seek out emotionally unavailable men or men who aren't right for them, who will take advantage of them because they don't know what real love is. They weren't modeled that by their father very much during the divorce, prior even. So, but yeah, I did enjoy feeling admired by an older man. I've always liked older men. I think there's reasoning, very obvious reasoning behind that. I did enjoy being given attention and being taken care of. He was paying for everything. I was a young, hot 22-year-old, so I was able to use my female prowess to get what I wanted. And that's actually another commonality as a woman in addiction. Not everyone does it, but I definitely used my sexuality to manipulate men.
Yeah.
I'll be honest and get what I wanted. And I'm not proud of it, but I was a very different person when I was in addiction. It was like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I was a completely different human than I am now. My brain chemistry was altered. Like I was not the same. I wouldn't do that today. It's just very interesting. So yeah, he did that. And he quickly got me into marijuana. And I'm like, marijuana is just marijuana. Everyone smokes marijuana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In California, it's legal.
Yeah, it's California. Alcohol and marijuana are widely accepted things people do to get the edge off and have fun. And we were, I was frequenting the downtown Venice scene in LA, like that kind of group. I really liked the pot smoking.
So what did that feel like for you? Just from different than alcohol, like what
pot?
When you talk about like taking the edge off, or like
it worked quicker for me.
Yeah.
It immediately gave me. It dulled my mind like that very quickly. Whereas alcohol, I would my stomach would hurt. Like if I had alcohol is such a astringent substance.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
It would burn my stomach almost. Like it was painful to consume.
Yeah.
But then once of course my mind got altered by the alcohol, I didn't feel the burning sensation anymore. So this was a lot more easily accessible for me to just
turn it off.
It was very quick. It was a very quick altering of my state of reality. It was quicker.
Yeah.
And more powerful in my opinion. Because I wasn't just smoking a joint. I was smoking quickly a bowl, maybe 2 or 3 a day. That's how, do you see how quickly now this is escalating?
Yeah.
Then he introduced me to cocaine. So that's,
as a mother, that's the thing. And I mean, because I feel the same thing, like society says this and this is okay.
Yeah.
And the cocaine just scares the hell out of me.
It's a very scary substance.
Yeah.
That was my kryptonite.
Yeah.
You know, it immediately altered everything. It put me into psychosis very quickly. I mean, within a couple weeks of using it, I started using it regularly. When I first started, it was maybe twice a week, which is still a lot. But then I would drink alcohol, consume marijuana, and I wanted to feel up because the alcohol and marijuana was making me too low.
Okay.
So now I'm trying to self-medicate, if you can see this happening.
Yeah.
So if I ever felt depression, cocaine would help me feel really up and happy, you know, and give me energy. And I got addicted to that adrenaline high that it would give me. But that's really what unraveled my life very quick. Within 11 months, I was using other hard drugs I won't go into. And I was put into an intensive rehabilitation program. So it took, within 11 months of being introduced to cocaine, I was like almost dead. So that's how quick.
Was that a family intervention that took you to
Yes.
to rehab?
Yes, because what happened is despite this drug use, I graduated college, Cal Poly, with a 3.5 GPA, which I was like kicking myself like, Taylor, you could have done it. Well, I also had a severe drug addiction, right? So looking back, it's like, I don't know how I graduated, but I would
good at overfunctioning.
Yes, because from a young age, I was used to overfunctioning. I was in a dance company. Well, from a young age, I was like in a dance company at the age of 10. I was also competitively horseback riding, like show jumping. I was doing those simultaneously, and I was getting straight A's. And that's how I thought my worth was shown, was my productivity and my achievement, because it was modeled to me by my parents. Both my parents are very intelligent, smart, like high achieving adults. They're both litigators, right? My mom has her own divorce firm.
Yes.
And Grant.
That's how we met.
Yeah, that's how you met.
Yes.
She's very entrepreneurial, you know, very driven.
She's genius.
She's genius.
And she understands people.
Yeah.
Like, and she
Which is
kept
key.
saying that the two of us needed to meet, and she was right. But
No, she understands people. She's very intuitive. She's not like a stereotypical attorney you'd think of who's like very
she's got
cold.
amazing people skills.
She does.
Yeah.
My dad
She
does
cares.
too.
Yeah.
My dad does too. And actually, I want to say my dad and I now have a great relationship. Like, that's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
You know, it got fractured from the divorce. It caused me to suppress my feelings. And of course, they came out very drastically later in my young adulthood through drug addiction and alcoholism. But I want to give people hope that my relationships are healed now.
Yeah.
They are healed.
It's beautiful. And those are the stories. That's what, I mean, everything you're saying tells me, I love when I see what I believe in, this generational healing.
Yes.
It is so possible.
Yeah.
But the hard work that goes into it, the fact that you do not get to put a Band-Aid over something and expect that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it's not just an admission. It is a deep dive.
Deep.
And what you are you're articulating so beautifully, like the grasp that you have on the journey you've been through is really, it's empowering and very impressive. So
I'm happy I can, offer that with my story.
Yeah.
Because for a long time I was very ashamed of it. I was shame. Brene Brown and her shame.
Yes.
You know?
Exactly. And we're both fans.
We are fans.
And I've given those books to my daughter, and she's now a fan, and it is at the root, and I never knew it.
Yeah.
Being ashamed of anything we've done. I mean, we're all human. We make mistakes.
Yes.
And the way that you're talking about your story with that you have let go of the shame, I can feel it. It's amazing.
I have, because, I didn't let go of it easily.
Yeah.
You know, it plagued me for a long time. But, really quick, I'll go back to my story and I'll show you how I overcame that shame. Is I went into rehab 3 weeks after graduating Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, because during my graduation I was high. I was It was not a good thing. It was not a good thing. My family could see it. I thought I was hiding it so well too. That's the fallacy right there. Is like, as an addict, you think you're hiding it so well, but no, they can see when you're like walking and you're like I was locking myself out of my apartment. I locked myself out of my apartment 3 times in a row.
Oh, wow.
While they were all in town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Like, I think I was in a slight psychosis looking back. Mm-hmm. I would be rushing around, getting my graduate dress on, and I would like slam my door and I'd lock myself out of the apartment. I can laugh at it now.
Yeah. But that becomes very inconvenient quickly.
It was very.
Calling somebody.
I'm calling my dad.
Again.
Of all people, my dad. Uh-huh. I'm like, Dad, I locked myself out of the apartment. And he's like, again? Uh-huh. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just stressed out. I'm just stressed out, right? So my graduation ceremony was horrible for Cal Poly. And that's something I'll always be bummed out about. Mm-hmm. I'm not ashamed of it anymore, but it was very embarrassing. Mm-hmm. I thought I lost my wallet on the grounds of the graduation ceremony. Mm-hmm. And so I was walking around asking people where my wallet was. I was like, it was
somewhere else.
Yeah.
You're somewhere else.
Yeah, I was also detoxing because I hadn't used cocaine in maybe 48 hours. And what happens is I would get really jittery, right? I'd start being very forgetful, locking myself out of places, really sweaty. Like, I couldn't eat, by the way. I was probably 30 pounds lighter than I am now. It was not a good look. My face was like ashen pale. There was no like youthful glow to my skin. Like there was nothing because my body was dying.
Yeah. Physiologically at 22?
2.
Yeah. That's a scary thought.
It's a very scary thought.
Yeah.
And I'd also always had pride in like my appearance and stuff. I think I was modeled that by my mom, who's very beautiful, and I was modeled that by Manhattan Beach. My dad was very handsome, and it's all about appearance. I remember my mom telling me like it's very important how you appear and present in the world. Mm-hmm. And I thought I looked great.
What's wrong with this?
I think I look like super hot. Like, I was just such in a different state of reality. Very altered.
Yeah.
Chemically.
Yeah.
And I just needed help.
Yeah.
And I didn't know I needed help. And I wanted to continue to use. So I went home.
Okay.
And for 3 weeks, I basically didn't come home. And I'd found...
So this is post-graduation, but before you went to rehab?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's a very specific 3-week period.
Yes.
I found a very dark group of people, very unscrupulous individuals in like Hermosa Beach. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of bad things happened, and I'm lucky to be alive. Mm. But it was a very scary situation. And I remember I did go back home, thank God, because my mom's like, there's this outpatient program I really want you to think about. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe, but.
How were your parents dealing with it at that point? Because they knew what was going on.
Yeah, obviously.
But as a parent, I mean, it's terrifying to be you, but it's also terrifying to be them.
Yes.
So was it a gentle conversation? Was it a hands-off conversation?
In the beginning, it was gentle. Uh-huh. It was, how do I approach my daughter who's dying in front of me? Slowly, but also quickly. Yeah. So she took me to lunch. And I remember I was forcing myself to eat because when you're on, my experiences when I was on stimulants for so long, my taste buds were altered. I couldn't taste food anymore. It tasted like cardboard. Oh, wow. My appetite was gone. It's hard for me to even drink water. Any substance in my body other than the drug didn't feel right. And that's what happens with addiction is you have severe cravings for the substance when it's no longer in your body. Your tolerance increases. So I was doing more and more cocaine on the daily. And I was starting to get nosebleeds, which was really disturbing to me. That actually freaked me out, which was interesting because I hadn't really been aware of how pale I was, or like it's like I had beer goggles on. Like I wasn't seeing myself clearly.
Yeah.
But once my body actually started to show physical like rejection and breakdown and deterioration, it's gross, but it did start to scare me.
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
Okay.
Now that I'm healthy, if there's any sign of like I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you know, I'm hyper aware.
Yes, absolutely.
Too aware sometimes when it's like, no, Taylor, you're fine.
Yeah.
But at this time, that freaked me out. She took me to lunch. I was forcing myself to eat. She took me to an outpatient program. I did sit and do the interview, and I realized she's trying to get me in here. And I was so like, my brain was so like, no, you need to continue to do what you're doing, right? Because I was so heavily addicted to cocaine. It wasn't even alcohol anymore, or marijuana. It was cocaine specifically. I ran away. Like I literally ran on my feet from the facility
and said no,
and I got high. And I found my ex-boyfriend, who was now my ex. He picked me up and we went and got high. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't sober anymore, of course, the 2 months. So like that didn't last very long. Yeah. And so what happened is my dad found me. He knew where my ex lived, so he went to the house. And he said, if you don't come out and come with us to this program, we're going to put you on a sober living. He was very honest with me up front. He goes, we are cutting you off financially. You are not welcome in our lives anymore. And it's as if you are dead to us.
Wow.
Because they were preparing at this point for me to die. Yeah. I was getting very sick too. Like, my lung, like I was inhaling so much cocaine. Yeah. If you think about it, it was hurting my lungs at this point. I was really sick now physically. Yeah. My body was now rebelling against me because it's like, my mind was hyper on getting drugs, but my body was rebelling. Yeah. And I remember like trying to go to doctors and being like, what's wrong with me? And they were like, doctors would talk to each other like she has a drug addiction, probably is what they were saying. Yeah. And they're like, we can't help you. Like, there's nothing. I'm like, is there anything you can give me? And they're like, no. And they looked really uncomfortable because they could tell I was addicted. Yeah. But when my dad, specifically my dad, told me that, I got in the car with him and I had less than an hour to go home and pack my belongings that were still packed from college and move into this female sober living in the South Bay. That was a very militant behavioral modification program and be enrolled in an outpatient program, drug rehabilitation. I didn't really have a choice, I felt. So back to your question. Yeah. I was fearful of being cut off financially. Another affliction of addiction is you're very selfish, very self-absorbed. Mm-hmm. Because all I thought about was, what can I get for me? What can I get? I don't care that it's killing my parents. Yeah. No matter the love I have for my parents, which I had plenty, the addiction overrides it.
Mm-hmm. That's something I think that is such an important thing for people to hear who are in the throes of this. Mm-hmm. That it's not a conscious choice to say, I don't love you, or I'm doing this to you. Right. That's not
correct. Yeah. Because I believed fully when I was in the throes of my addiction, I was only doing it to myself. I fully believed that. Yeah. Like I fully believed, and I made myself believe. It was crazy phenomena, but I fully believed I'm only hurting Taylor, and I'm actually okay with that. I'm not hurting them because they're not the ones, their bodies aren't suffering from the physical drug abuse.
You don't have that ability to see the connections.
No, I didn't. I did not have the ability to see how horridly I was impacting my loved ones. Mm-hmm. And, there's a theory out there of addiction is a choice versus a disease of the mind. Uh-huh. And it's very complex because there is a choice involved. Today, I'm over 2 years sober now. I have a very intentional choice to pick up a drink or a drug. That's on me. That's my responsibility.
Yeah.
However, once I do pick up the drink or drug, usually it's alcohol for me first, then drugs will follow. Once that substance, that mind-altering chemical hits my bloodstream, my power of choice now is
Gone.
It's gone. It's nil and none. It doesn't matter how much I love my family. It doesn't matter if I'm in a relationship and I love my partner. It doesn't matter, I don't have children, but if I had children, nothing. My very intense desire to succeed in life, that doesn't matter anymore. Because what happens is my brain, it's a malady of the mind.
Yeah.
The addiction, the disease of addiction. Now it's a disease. It's now my disease, which right now is in remission because I'm not using or drinking.
Yeah.
But it will flare if I put any substance in me. And I will revert immediately back to where I was.
That was a really clear description, and I've never heard it broke down like that.
Okay.
Yeah. The choice and the disease. It's not either or.
Right.
Like
there's
the
a choice
first, and the disease is in, and you know the disease is there.
Yes.
But once
once I'm, as we call it, once I'm on the run,
yeah,
I'm off. So it's not fair to be like, oh, I don't have any choice in the matter. I do have a choice to pick up.
Yeah.
Right. But once it's in me, no more choice.
So how? And maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but how do you manage that today? That day-by-day choice?
That's a good question. How do I manage the choice to not pick up? Well, I am in a 12-step recovery program. And they've taught me very clearly that Taylor's will, if I just go by my will, things are not going to work out.
Yeah. Because
addiction is self-will run riot. It's like my will and my ego has completely run rampant. Like I will bulldoze anyone down in my path to get my drugs or my drink because that's what my brain tells me I need to do. And I am a complete puppet to the disease in my mind of addiction. So how I handle that is I'm able to think back to the extreme wreckage I caused my family. I now love myself.
Yeah, that's huge.
I've really been in a lot of therapy and I've worked a lot on remedying those core faulty belief systems that I adopted when my parents got divorced, which is very common for daughters of divorce to adopt, feeling less than, unlovable, unworthy of love, fear of abandonment, failure, rejection, fear of vulnerability and intimacy because you don't want to be seen because you're afraid you're going to be rejected. I've been able to really look at those face on and challenge them and say that those are not true. Those aren't true. And those core beliefs used to drive my addiction. Yeah. So how I handle it, once again, I keep going a little tangential, but I handle it by, I do pray. Yeah. I call it God. I pray to something greater than me. Yeah. And it's not a human. It's nothing that's like fallible. Humans are all fallible. Yeah. I don't pray, I used to be in very codependent male relationships. And, I would pray like for that person to take care of me and they'll keep me sober. And I realized today my higher power keeps me sober. And what helps me stay sober too is being of service to people. Yeah. And getting out of me. Because another thing of addiction is it's a very self-absorbed malady, right? Right. So if I'm just focusing on Taylor, me, I'm not going to like a drink and a drug will start to sound really good. And I have to be really on top of this. I am never free from going back, relapse. I'm not ever, it's unfortunate, but like I don't have the capability ever in this lifetime for me to be free of potentially relapsing. So I have to take actionable steps every day to be of service to other people, to not isolate, because isolating is something where my brain starts to run kind of crazy, the mind chatter. Yes. chitta, I believe, as they call it in yoga,
Yes,
right?
absolutely,
So
yes.
I do a lot of yoga and movement. Dance was always such a beautiful cathartic expression for me. I don't dance anymore, but I've been able to incorporate the beautiful practice of yoga,
Yes.
you know, to expel
huge.
energy. I'm a person with a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So what happened in my past with addiction is the energy imploded. I didn't have anywhere there was no outlet for it. There was no
Yeah.
healthy outlet.
Yeah.
So instead I would go to dance floors and like dance, you know, and
Yes.
expel that energy, of course, under the influence of substances. Or like run around with guys, expelling the energy that way, like not healthy. So today I just really remember where my disease can take me. Because I remember too, it's not a matter of like, I just want to be sober. It's a matter of life or death.
Yeah.
Because I'm aware if I relapse, I will die.
Yeah.
I don't want to die.
No.
I don't want my parents to bury their child. They don't deserve that.
No.
So the love of my parents, but I relapsed after my first time getting sober, and I only did it for my parents. That's the reason. I wasn't getting sober for myself. I was getting sober to please my parents because I'm a people pleaser.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, they want me to get sober. Yeah, I want to get them off my back. And I was also scared of not being supported financially. See, very selfish intentions.
Yeah. But another root chakra issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I haven't really
Yeah.
ever thought about it correlated to the root chakra
Yeah.
as much as I can. And this is really helpful.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'll look more into that.
Yeah.
Because there's a theme you're seeing coming up, the root chakra being disabled,
Yeah.
uprooted. So yeah, that's what I found helps me.
So you and I talked off camera about that relapse between rehab and doing that for your parents.
Yes.
And then I believe you called it a God
Shot?
shot.
Oh, what happened there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can you tell that
absolutely.
story?
Totally. This was the night of March 31st, 2021. Because I got my 2 years
Just
sober.
over 2 years ago.
Yeah, April 1st is my sobriety date.
Okay.
So yeah, this is, I believe you asked me prior, what led me to need to get help, what brought me there,
Yeah.
right? So I remember that night I was very high on drugs. I just had a plethora.
Post your first rehab that you did for your
Yes,
parents.
I got 18 months sober, my first sobriety.
Okay.
We'll call it my first sobriety. I got 18 months sober. And then I met a guy. And it was not a healthy, functional relationship, which is a commonality that daughters of divorce go through,
Yeah.
right? And I relapsed over our breakup. Plus COVID had just hit.
Oh.
This was 2019. Yes. Yeah, it was 2020, I believe. It was one of those.
Okay. Yeah.
It gets fuzzy now.
2020 was COVID. So March of...
So it would have been 2020 when I relapsed.
Okay.
Because I got sober in 2019 and I had 18 months sober.
Okay.
So it would have been 2020.
Okay.
I relapsed and it was really awful. I would get 30 days sober. After 30 days, I would relapse. And I would get 30 days on, 30 days off. And this would continue for months. It was really awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about feeling out of control when I'm
Yeah.
kind of a control freak because
Yes.
my life was so out of control at a young age, and drugs gave me some semblance of control, at least as that's what I thought. I could
Right.
alter my state of being. That's
Yes.
control until you can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until now drugs have control of me.
Right.
Yeah. So that was a very awful experience for me. And then I went to a sober living. I ran away from that sober living because I wasn't ready to get sober. And that's another thing, and I think is important for loved ones to understand about if they have a loved one who's in addiction. If they don't want to get sober, they will not get sober. It doesn't matter how much you try to intervene. If the person who is afflicted with addiction does not want to get sober, it's heartbreaking, but there's no one who will make them.
Right.
You can do interventions. They tried that on me. I ran away from it. I mean, because I was so messed up. Like, I was so like, I just need drugs. That's all my brain wanted. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs got flipped.
Yep.
Food, shelter, water, relationships didn't matter anymore. Drugs were at the very top over water. Like, it was insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
So relapsed on and off. Finally, that night of March 31st, I came back. 2021. I remember if I put another inkling of a substance in my body, I had this overwhelming fear and knowing, it was a very intense intuition, I would die. I can't, it's what I call a God shot. It's like something more intelligent than me, like omniscient, omnipotent, an energy, like it's like a voice was screaming at me. It wasn't mine. It was telling me, if you do this, you will die. And your mother, I was at home at the time, your mother's going to come down and find her daughter a corpse on the ground. Like, do you really want that? And that's where my love actually overcame the addiction, because I thought for once of someone else than me. And I don't know how, that's why it's a God shot, because I was so consumed by this self-absorbed addiction. There's no way in that altered state of mind I could think of someone else other than me, but I did.
Yeah. Something more
It was so
powerful
beautiful, actually.
Yeah.
It could have been very tragic, but it turned out to be very beautiful, because I flushed the drugs I was going to use down the toilet. Something like took agency of my body, walked me to the toilet, flushed it. I went up to my mom, and my mom, of course, knew at the time. She didn't want me at the house, but I was there, and it was horrible. I went to her and I said, look, I need help.
Yeah. What a moment.
That was a huge moment. And she looked at me going, yes, you do.
Yeah. And
she called my dad. And a beautiful thing, actually, that came out of my addiction is it brought my parents, they were forced to co-parent again and be in the same room with each other and not want to rip each other's throats out. Like, they were able to come together and be effective communicators with each other because they were trying to save their daughter.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I went into addiction knowingly, like, I'm going to do this because then my parents are going to get, like, it wasn't planned or calculated.
Yeah. Right.
But I did see that happen. And I've had my mom actually tell me, like, you know, it was a gift it brought us. We were able to co-parent when they had such a hostile, horrible divorce. They were able to come together and save and work together to get me to rehab. So I went to Texas.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I first went to detox, and I was willing at this point because this past relapse over 2 years ago was so bad that it was a hell I don't wish upon my worst enemy.
Yeah.
To be honest. And I was ready to be done.
Yeah.
But now it wasn't just for my parents. It was for me, because I'm like, Taylor, you don't deserve this.
Yeah.
You don't deserve this. Like, you don't deserve to treat yourself like this. You don't. So it was very painful to go to detox. You know, I'm not saying the process was easy, but I did know that core belief in me. I challenged of you're not worthwhile or deserving. I challenged it, and I was like, no, Taylor, you are deserving to live.
Yeah.
And I also that night came to a point where I realized I couldn't live with drugs and I couldn't live without them. So I was in a very horrible middle ground that no one ever wants to be in. It's like a hell. It's an actual hell on earth. I believe we can create our own hell.
Yeah.
And I had. So I've been to hell and back. And I was like, okay, I have to get sober. There's more purpose for me in this life.
Clearly. And that is, I mean, it's hard to look at these incredible, I mean, I've had chills this entire time because as a mother, you're such a beautiful girl. And I have such a strong connection with mothers and daughters. And I was telling you that before we started. Like, there's something so empowering about female energy and the mother-daughter story. And not that my boys love them to death, but they're like that story of you and your mom and just seeing how you guys are today.
Yeah.
And knowing that you've been to hell and back.
She has too.
And Yeah.
The parents.
Yeah. But those silver linings that come out of the worst stories, they're always there.
They are.
Because there's something bigger than us.
Yeah.
And you're doing exactly why we go through these hard things and then are able to tell our stories. You can empower so many other people to walk through that same hell and get better.
Right? Because
Yeah.
today, like, I'm sober. I overcame a lethal addiction. I'm in graduate school again. My relationships that were very breached and fractured have been healed because I'm showing up the way I am showing up today.
Yeah.
Because I am being of service to other people. It's a really beautiful thing. And, you know, I'm actually happy I went through what I did because...
What a place to get to.
Yes, because I can now help other young women, anyone really, like who's suffering from addiction. And when I become an LMFT, which I'm in school for, I can help them go through the throes of the mental turmoil that comes with addiction and move through those faulty core beliefs.
Yeah.
And there's hope. I want to tell other people who have an addiction problem, if they're listening, like, there is hope. You just have to be willing, open, and honest. As an addict who's in addiction, if you want help, I'll say it again. You have to be open, honest, and willing to get help. And if you are, there are ample opportunities to help you out there. Facilities, rehab, anything like that. 12-step programs. People who are loved ones who have a loved one suffering from addiction. You know, I recommend taking care of yourself. If the addict in question is ready for help and willing to get help, direct them to a facility that can help them. You know, I think it's really important going to your own support groups to help you deal with the codependency, because addiction is a family disease. It's not just the addict. There's a lot of codependency usually in a family. There's a lot of enabling in a family.
Absolutely.
That can be unconscious. And it's no one's fault. It's a family system dysfunction.
And this is what generational healing is all about. That's, there's so much, I feel like we could talk for hours.
I know.
Two things. One, I want people to check out this book because you've spoken so highly about it. And like your best takeaway from Daughters of Divorce.
I love Daughters of Divorce. I think it is written by a mother and a daughter. A takeaway is it's very important to, as an adult, I recommend this book for adult daughters of divorce.
Okay. Good distinction.
I think that's very important. You've had time to kind of process the divorce. It's important as an adult daughter of divorce to look at the divorce from an adult perspective and not be so enmeshed in it as a child. It's important to look at father-daughter wounds that haven't been healed. And to look at them clearly as an adult, whether it be through therapy, counseling, self-examination. Another important takeaway from Daughters of Divorce is forgiving parents, because parents are fallible. They're just people. And I remember when I came to that realization as an adult, like, my parents are just people. They're not these like omnipotent beings that I thought of when I was a little girl. I looked at parents as parents, not people. Forgiveness is so important. It doesn't mean condoning bad behaviors. It doesn't mean condoning emotional abuse, but forgiving the past is so important. Healing father-daughter wounds is so important. As we've seen in my addiction story, there's a theme of me seeking out very emotionally unavailable men, emotionally abusive men. And I won't drop any names, of course, but that's been my pattern. And I've decided, since I'm in school now, I'm taking a break from relationships, because another takeaway from this is learning, which I'm still working on, to really love yourself. Because you can only be in a healthy, loving relationship if you love yourself. You can't go into a relationship, and it talks about it in the book. You can't go into a relationship wanting the other person to validate that you're lovable.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's codependency, and it's just rife for
so many problems.
Issues.
And generational patterns.
Exactly.
Keep.
Also, it talks about in the book that we, daughters of divorce, do not have to keep the legacy of divorce going through generations. Yeah. We don't have to be a prisoner of our past. Our past doesn't have to dictate our futures.
Yeah.
We can have loving relationships.
Yeah.
Like, there's hope.
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah, if
we're
you
all
do the work.
capable. Yeah, and the work is hard.
Yes.
But it's also super empowering and interesting, and you meet the most incredible people. And as you start to expand that healing community, you're lifted up. So you are, yes, making choices for yourself and on your own.
Yes.
But you're being supported by a community of people with like minds and like hearts that can, because we do need to be connected.
Yes.
Like we're wired for human connection. And that at the root of everything I'm doing is something that I realized, that human connection is just something that, one, I've always craved, and two, it's so important to every single person out there.
It's vital.
Everyone's got a story.
I mean, we're not meant to isolate.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're human beings. We're not meant to isolate. We're meant to be around people and connect.
Yeah.
And have a community.
Yeah.
It talks about themes in there that, fears of abandonment, difficulty with like intimacy, not really sexual, more like vulnerability.
Yeah.
Emotional vulnerability is really hard for daughters of divorce.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying every daughter of divorce is like that. It's just a theme. They did a lot of samplings of like 300 daughters of divorces, and they came up with these themes, core beliefs.
And you definitely see these patterns in the world. It's, the science will back up the experience. Yeah. I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
But those can be overcome.
Absolutely.
With self-examination.
Yeah.
And work.
Yeah.
It takes work.
Yeah.
But the work is worthwhile.
Completely.
Yeah. So I think forgiving too is really important. Just forgiving your parents and realizing that, it's not my fault. If I could go back when I was younger, what I would tell myself is, don't go for someone that doesn't deserve you.
Yes.
Like, you deserve more than you think.
Oh, that's huge.
You're lovable, you're worthwhile, and you're seen. I always thought I was invisible, but like, I'm seen.
Wow.
Don't settle for less than what I deserve is what I was trying to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you just answered the question that I always ask, which is, what is a piece of advice you could give to your younger self? That was brilliant. Yeah. This whole interview has been pieces of advice.
Yeah.
That will serve so many people.
Good.
And for that, I cannot thank you enough. This is a topic that is so close to my heart, and something that I know is affecting so many families out there. And this conversation is full of hope and optimism and the work that goes into making that story true. So
good.
I am like, hats off. So in awe of your journey, and I know it's a day-by-day proposition and choice, and we're always, these connections, we're here. I love everything you're doing. And
thank you, Wendy. Yeah. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you.
That you invited me on.
Check out Daughters of Divorce.
It's a good one.
And just thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm honored and humbled, really.
Well, I'm honored you had me.
Thank you. This was such an incredible interview, and I just thank you guys so much for joining us on What I Meant to Say. There is so much gold in this. I hope you'll check it out, and we are just here to remind you to be real, be you, and be better. Thank you for joining us on What I Meant to Say, another production of Inspired Edutainment, brought to you by Be Better Media.